sent out an email earlier today acknowledging the amazing set of awards that he's received in the last year from all over the world. I mean, in his own country, he receives the Career Achievement Award from the German Psychological Society in recognition of a lifetime of scientific achievement that is, quote, a landmark in the history of psychology. And recognizes some of the areas that he's worked in. But he also received two Career Achievement Awards from AERA, one from the Division C, Learning and Instruction, designed to honor a program of research that represents a significant advancement of our understanding of learning and instruction, and also one from the Special Interest Group on Technology, Instruction, and Learning, and completely another continent, another area. He received the European Association Award for Research on Learning and Instruction, the OVAR, I don't know how to pronounce that, Award for Outstanding Contributions to Science.
It's French. I wouldn't know either French.
And so a wonderful recognition of his work, and for us to bask in his reflected glory, and looking really good for our ERA, particularly in education, where all these impact sorts of things will be coming. But we're also very lucky today to have the opportunity to listen to Reinhard talk about some of the research that led to some of these interesting awards and where that research is going to lead in the future, and in collaboration with some of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Herb. And I mean, too much on it. I can reciprocate on that. So maybe not all of you know that Herb received the Distinguished Contributions to Psychological Science Award. It's called 2017, but he in fact received it just a week ago at the conference of the Australian Psychological Society, right? And he also gave a fabulous keynote. And nobody kind of the institute was, I don't know, but it was a great, really great talk. So congratulations for on that award. I'm going to talk about students' academic emotions, and traditionally research on emotions in education has focused on just one single emotion, and that is students' achievement-related anxiety, right? And we know all about this research in terms of constructs such as test anxiety, math anxiety, performance anxiety, language anxiety, sports anxiety, and so on. And there are certainly good reasons to look into this emotion. I mean, opportunities in our society are made contingent on achievement. By implication, it's critically important to avoid failure. And the consequence of that, obviously, then, is that many are, much of the time, and in many settings, just afraid of failing. Fear of failure is one of the most frequently occurring achievement emotions across settings, not only in education. Anxiety is not only frequent, it also can be quite detrimental for your motivation, for your health, your well-being, your cognitive performance, and resulting achievement outcomes across life domains. So it is an important emotion. And that has been recognized relatively early in the 20th century. We do have empirical studies on students' test anxiety since the 1930s. Brown at the University of Chicago, that was kind of the start. Really acknowledged, I mean, most often Mandel and Zarrison, beginning of the 50s, are cited for having given birth to test anxiety research. But there was something going on even prior to that. A multitude of theories have been developed. We do have more than 2,000 empirical studies. And we also have consistent knowledge from these studies on the component structures of achievement anxiety. We know how to measure this. We know that it develops pretty early in the preschool, elementary school years, and then stays at relatively high average levels throughout the secondary, post-secondary years, right? We know how it can impact learning and achievement. We also know what to do about it, at least in terms of individual psychotherapy. So we know a lot about these vicious cycles of failure on an exam that reduce self-confidence, a lack of motivation, the use of poor study strategies, lousy preparation, anxiety before and during the next exam, and again, failure, right? We also know that anxiety can generalize. So careful attack dog here on the right-hand side, careful school ahead, should we go in there anyways? Good question, right? But what do we know about emotions other than anxiety? And until pretty recently, not that much. Other emotions, negative emotions such as anger, different variants of anger. Despair. I drink the substance because I failed my math exam. A little test of your German language capabilities. Confusion. Boredom. Students report 32% of classroom instruction time. Different indicators, partial indicators for boredom. This definitely is boredom, right? Positive emotions. Surprise can be negative or positive. This seems to be positive. Curiosity. At an early age, so 3 equal fish in a little pond. Now that is curious, right? Enjoyment of learning. Pleasant relaxation after the work is done. When we started out doing this research 20 years ago, that was the situation. So we made a search of the literature looking into studies linking any of the emotions listed on the left-hand side here to topics such as learning, performance, test, achievement, and so on. Found anxiety was the one that attracted interest. Any other emotion, just a handful of studies at the time. For example, anxiety, more than 1,000 studies. The complementary positive emotion would be hope. 9 studies on hope at the end of the 90s. Now, the situation has changed in the meantime during the past 20 years. It has changed substantially. What you see here is the increase of studies on achievement emotions. And you see quite an increase since Brown started doing research on test anxiety at the end of the 1930s. But, and that's good, but almost all of what has been done up to date is focused on achievement emotions. Anxiety being one of them. There are other achievement emotions that then also found interest, but the world of academic emotions is not exhausted by looking into emotions related to success and failure only, right? At least 4 groups of academic emotions could play a role in students' learning. Achievement emotions obviously related to success and failure, but there are also epistemic emotions related to generation of knowledge, topic emotions related to the contents of learning materials, and obviously social emotions related to one's peers and teachers and parents and so on. I'm going to focus now for the next half hour on this group here on epistemic emotions, and what I'm going to do is I provide you with a little bit of a definition, and then discuss how we could measure these emotions. I will address some hypotheses we developed with regard to the origins and functions of epistemic emotions, and then present evidence from 2 strands of empirical studies. So the first issue would be, what is that epistemic emotions? Generally, emotions can be defined by their object focus. Epistemic emotions have knowledge and the generation of knowledge as their object, which implies that they are triggered by knowledge-generating aspects of cognitive activities and serve purposes of acquiring knowledge about the world and oneself. And these emotions, this is quite interesting, they have been discussed for quite a long time by philosophers and in pretty systematic ways, but philosophers just didn't, they were not interested in then also looking into these emotions from an empirical perspective, right? A prototypical situation for the arousal of epistemic emotions would be discrepant information that involves cognitive incongruity. So if you are confronted with unexpected information, you can be surprised. Curiosity to know more could be the next step. Then anxiety if existing beliefs that you hold are deeply disturbed. You may be delighted when the problem is solvable, confused when incongruity cannot be resolved, and frustrated or in the end bored when incongruity persists. So these are just a few examples for epistemic emotions. There are prototypical epistemic emotions that are epistemic almost by definition. And 3 of them are surprise, curiosity, and confusion. I'm going to focus on exactly these 3. There are more than them. I'm going to focus on the 3. For other emotions, it is the case that they can be either epistemic or non-epistemic, it's just multiple objects. So delight, joy, enjoyment can, occur with related to any kind of activity or outcome, right? Not only epistemic activities. how could we assess these emotions? Emotions are conceptualized as systems of interrelated psychological processes, usually today, including affective, cognitive, physiological, expressive, motivational component processes, which then would, for example, involve uneasy feelings, worries about a non-solvable problem, peripheral activation, confused facial expression, avoidance, motivation in an emotion like confusion, and which also makes it possible, at least in principle, to use various methods to assess these emotions, including self-report, but also implicit assessment, neuroimaging, peripheral physiological analysis, and behavioral observation. And I'm going to focus on self-report and address this instrument that we developed during the recent years, Epistemic Emotion Scales. Previous self-report measures of epistemic emotions have focused on just one of them, curiosity, certainly important, but just not the only one. We are lacking instruments assessing multiple epistemic emotions, and we are also lacking instruments assessing state epistemic emotions, instruments that would make it possible to capture the dynamic nature of emotion during learning. And so we aimed with this instrument to make it possible to assess various emotions, more than just curiosity, in both a state-like and trait-like manner, while preserving psychometric quality. And that's not an easy task. What you need is multiple items per emotion, but at the same time you want to keep administration time as short as possible. So we then solve these problems as it often is done in emotion self-report research by using adjectives as items with 3 items per emotion. The instrument assesses 7 epistemic emotions: surprise, curiosity, joy, confusion, anxiety, frustration, boredom. Instruction: how do you feel right now? Surprised, amazed, astonished, curious, interested, inquisitive, and so on. Response: not at all, too very strong. And that's a short version, just 1 adjective point per emotion, which then would be 7 items overall. Right? These are some sample alpha reliabilities from a sample of 438 university students. And we also looked into the structural validity of the instrument and competitively tested 3 different models. A one-factor model, or the bipolar affect factor. A 2-factor model, and that's a pretty prevalent approach in emotion research and affect more generally, right? Positive, negative affect. And the discrete emotions might be differentiating between these 7 emotions. And what we found was the 1-factor model, no fit at all. Then 2 variants of this 2-factor model either subsumed surprise on the positive affect or on the negative affect, but both of the models also did not do very well. The 7-factor model was the one that showed an acceptable fit, even without including cross-loading, so ESAM was not needed here. These are the correlations between the emotions. That's latent correlation, so you can see there's sufficient discriminant validity. What's interesting here is, and that makes these emotions different from other types of emotions, they are the curiosity, enjoyment that are on the positive side, confusion, anxiety on the negative side, but they correlate positively across the positive-negative valence divide. And the differentiation here is between these activating emotions on the one hand, the first 6, and boredom, which is a deactivating emotion, on the other hand. So they seem to be organized along the arousal dimension, not the valence dimension, which I think is really pretty, I didn't expect that, pretty interesting. So we do have evidence for reliability and validity. We also found that they are, in, let's say, Western countries so far, sufficiently equivalent across different languages and cultures. There are different versions, and they have been, it has been published last year, but it's already, translations are already being done. Okay. How could we explain the arousal of these emotions and what are their functions? Now, in terms of origins and antecedents, I tend to use the control value theory to think about the origins of emotion. This theory proposes that emotions are a function of appraisals of the current situation, your capabilities, ongoing events, and so on, and that 2 categories of appraisals are most important. Your perception of control, the control you are having over your activities and the outcomes of the activities, and the perceived value of these activities and outcomes. For example, if I perceive being able to master some learning material and I'm interested in the material, then I can enjoy learning. Or if I'm out of control from a subjective perspective over my performance on an upcoming exam, but it would be critically important not to fail the exam, then I'm afraid of failure. Now, I would say that these two categories of appraisals are important for epistemic emotions as well. And value is an amplifier for any kind of emotion except for boredom, any kind of emotion. But I will still say this is just not sufficient. This theory would need to be expanded to also address epistemic emotions. And I would say that cognitive incongruity and the presence of incongruity are a prime driver for epistemic emotions, in addition to control and value. There can be different types of cognitive incongruity, and I could imagine that these three categories are not only exemplary, but maybe even exhaustive. So the current information can be contradictory in itself, that is incoming into your system, right? The current information can be incongruent with your prior expectations and beliefs, and it also can be incongruent with the desired state of information, the knowledge you may want to acquire, which then would be an information gap as addressed in George Ludenstein's information gap theory of curiosity. The first two could trigger all three of these prototypical epistemic emotions here. The last one is specifically responsible for curiosity. I'm going to address in what is going to follow the first two here: contradictory information and mismatch with prior expectations. Okay, functions for learning and conceptual change. It makes sense when thinking about the functions of emotions to use two traditional dimensions describing human affect: valence, positive, negative, activation, activating, deactivating, to make it simple, which then renders four categories: positive, activating, enjoyment, hope, curiosity, and so on. There's debate if curiosity is positive or negative. Negative activating, positive deactivating, negative deactivating, hopelessness, boredom. And you would assume that emotions of these four categories impact learning, performance, conceptual change via a number of mediating mechanisms, and this is not an exhaustive list here, but that's some of the more important ones. The availability of cognitive resources assumes motivation to learn, memory processes, and their strategy use. And we would assume that positive activating emotions, such as curiosity, should preserve cognitive resources and focus attention on the task at hand, sustain interest and motivation in the development of interest, facilitate relational and flexible information processing, and the use of deep learning strategies. So, under most conditions and in most individuals, positive activation emotions should be beneficial. And the opposite could be true for deactivating negative emotions. They deplete cognitive resources. If you are bored, you just start daydreaming, your mind begins to wander, right? Your motivation is undermined, any kind of motivation is undermined, you just engage in shallow information processing, if at all. Right. The middle two categories are a bit more complicated. If we take the negative activating and maybe take anxiety again as an example, anxiety as boredom depletes cognitive resources. You start worrying about possible failure, right? Undermines your intrinsic motivation, the development of interest. But on the other hand, we know that anxiety can strongly motivate you to invest in effort in order to avoid failure, right? And it can also facilitate specific kinds of memory processes. We know that from memory research. So overall, the effects are just a bit more ambivalent and ambiguous, right? Which then overall implies positive activating, usually positive, negative deactivating, I would say universally so negative effects, and the middle two categories, variable effects. Okay, two strands of evidence for surprise, curiosity, and confusion. The first one, we looked into the relations between students' epistemic beliefs, their epistemic emotions, and conceptual change. assuming that beliefs influence emotions and that emotions have an impact on conceptual change. And we did this collaborating with Muis, who is doing research on epistemic beliefs, and Sinatra, conceptual change and science education. These are some of the published, the starting point, kind of the starting point of this chapter in the APA Educational Psychology Handbook. So what we did across these studies was following this experimental procedure here. We assessed students' epistemic beliefs. And I guess you do have Paula seeing that, or are you confused?
No.
Yes? No? Sorry. Okay, we assessed their epistemic beliefs, their prior knowledge, and we let them read contradictory texts on controversial topics such as climate change or genetically modified foods or vaccination. And this, to an extent, I mean, obviously, is country and culture specific. We then assess their epistemic emotions during reading using the Epistemic Emotion Scale. And at the end, assess their post-stage knowledge, which relative to prior knowledge then is conceptual change, right? And we did that with university students from 3 different countries. Epistemic belief, we used the dimensions proposed by Barbara Hofer and Paul Pinchot in the 1970s: complexity, uncertainty, active construction, justification. So if you believe that scientific knowledge is complex, not certain, changes, needs to be actively constructed, and that needs to be justified through inquiry, that would be constructivist belief, right? If you believe that knowledge is simple, certain, does not need to change, does not evolve over time, can just be acquired from authority, can also be based on opinion, then that would be a less constructivist belief. And what we assumed was that constructivist beliefs, when then being exposed to contradictory tests, would be aligned with these contradictory tests, and thus dispose students to experience curiosity, and that less constructivist beliefs that are not aligned with being exposed to contradictory material would lead to surprise and confusion. And we then also assumed the emotions will impact students' learning strategies, then reading, and their acquisition of knowledge and conceptual change. So what we assumed was constructivist beliefs should prompt curiosity. Surprise curiosity should facilitate deep learning, which in turn then should have a positive effect on knowledge and conceptual change. For confusion, we left it open was the proposed direction of effects should be. For less constructivist beliefs, we assume that they will trigger surprise and confusion when being confronted with contradictory materials. In the first study, we followed this procedure that I just explained and used texts on climate change. The first text, and it was scientific tests written by scientists. The first one, climate change is man-made, right? And the second one, no, it's due to natural causes, in direct contradiction. The third test, climate change has negative consequences, and the fourth one, no, it is having positive consequences, and that was, I mean, Northern Canada, whatever. So, all right. So this is an example. Man-made greenhouse effect, humans cause climate. You do not need to read this. This is an example for one of these texts. What did we find? That's the beliefs, that's the emotions, that's learning strategies, and this is knowledge in this first study. Out of 6 proposed effects of beliefs on emotions, we found 2. Believing that knowledge, scientific knowledge, is simple and can be acquired from authorities, promoted students' confusion when being confronted with these contradictory texts. That was it. Curiosity, positive effects on critical thinking, liberation, surprise, and negative effect counter to expectations, and these 2 learning strategies lead with positive effects on conceptual change. Second study was basically a replication. We used a tuple-specific epistemic beliefs questionnaire that related to climate change to just follow principles of symmetry here. And for the learning strategies, we didn't use a questionnaire, we used a think-aloud protocol to tap more directly in students' learning processes. And these are the findings. Out of 6 proposed effects, 1 of them believing that knowledge is simple, promoted, surprise, and then a few effects here subsequent. The third study was again a variation, and here we assessed the emotions immediately after each text, that has not been done in the two prior studies. And we also had a different kind of post-test measure in terms of self-generated essay-like summaries that they were coded, machine-coded, and coded by human coders. And so the structure was the same as previously. The first text man-made, the second one then contradictory, negative consequences, the fourth text contradictory, no positive consequences. So the text number 2 and 4 are contradictory, and what we find is for text number 2, next to no effect of beliefs on the emotions, no effect of the emotions on knowledge. For the fourth text, a little bit better, but this here would be counter to our expectations and a bit of effects on knowledge. Now, so there's a bit of encouragement, and it's all published in learning instruction, whatever kind of journals. But this is not really satisfying, right? I mean, I didn't think this is satisfying, this set of findings. And it's much more complex, and it's 8 different emotions, whatever, and how many dimensions of beliefs and so on. And the question is why? So there were effects, and most of the significant effects, not all of them, were in the expected direction, but we found less than 30% of what we had thought we should find. The effects were weak, the effects were not consistent. Why? You cannot have any kinds of speculation, I mean, why that might be the case, and I mean, poor outcome measures, for example, or whatever. I mean, we discussed any kinds of possible reasons. But I suspect that there's a more general and more fundamental problem here, and that's a problem that is not only typical for this field of research, and this is the use of between-person design. So what we are having here, and that, as I said, I mean, that's a general issue, right? What we are having here is theories that make an attempt to explain within-person psychological functioning. The functioning of cognition, emotion, motivation within an individual's human or human more generally. But the vast majority of studies that we see use between-person designs. Correlational or experimental does not really make a difference. And the thing is, you cannot infer from, we know that, I mean, from between-person variation, how persons do function individually, because entire individual correlation of variables are statistically independent and can diverge widely. And this is my favorite example here. This is taken from Schmidt's JPSB in the beginning of the 1990s. It's a medical example, relation between duration of sleep and the frequency of migraine headaches. And what you see here across persons, it's a positive relation. Now that suggests sleeping in leads to headaches, right? And the medication would be get up in time, get up early, set the alarm clock at 5:30, and you get rid of your headaches. But if you look at this relation within persons, it's just the opposite, negative relations, right? So better look that you get sufficient sleep in order to reduce headaches. Completely different conclusion. So between person, within person covariation can diverge widely, which implies if we want to investigate within person function, we need to use within person analysis. And that's what we did in a more recent little series of studies on epistemic emotions, and we want to see how this works. What we wanted to examine, similar to the first time, cognitive incongruity. Does this influence epistemic emotions, and do epistemic emotions then influence students' knowledge exploration? We used a trivia task, 20 items, and then asked students a number of, and I announced, I don't know if you got the announcement, I didn't get it, but anyways, the announcement for this presentation here included taking a little test, a little quiz. So I propose we now do that collectively, if you would be open to that. And it's a 7-item version of this 20-item test here, right? So a test now. And the first item I'm going to present is this one. Chameleons can adapt their skin coloring to their environmental surroundings. Is true or false? What would you say?
True. True.
Okay. Biologists say false. Reason chameleons usually do not adapt their skin color to their mental surroundings. They change their coloring according to their mood. That is, the color serves communicative purposes to interact with peers, and it does not really have anything to do with the environment per se.
Unless the environment impacts it.
What's that?
Unless the environment impacts it.
Yeah, and so on. Okay, so we collectively failed. I failed on that one as well. So this is now for Australians here, right? In Australia, water throws down the plug in the same direction as in Europe. True or false?
True.
Who would say true?
I did.
You are the only one?
No, it's so true.
You would say?
It goes the same in the whole world.
Somebody false?
False. Then.
Two false. Okay, 50-50. 50-50. It's true. The water throws down the plug hole, and the reason is much too fast to be affected by earth rotation, and participants can then also, require further information, and one of the effects of earth rotation cause the direction of winds to be deflected, which is just not that speed, right? And this is the Coriolis force, and due to that force, rivers in the northern hemisphere erode more strongly on their right bank in the direction of flow, and the southern hemisphere has the opposite. So it does have an effect, just that water down the, this is just too fast, right? Okay, now this is now for former and present Americans, okay, right? Okay, ketchup is an American invention, true or false?
False. False.
False. Who would say? That's correct.
False.
I hear false. Okay, you're right. It's false. And the reason is, next to everything, maybe except for the steam engine, has been invented by the Chinese, right? Yes, you saw. Okay, original giraffe from Ketsia, the Chinese South giraffe from fermented. Okay, another American one. English is the official language of the United States of America. True or false? Herb. Herb is confused.
I would say false.
Okay, who would say true?
Maybe it's probably true.
You would say true. The Australians say true. Okay, anyways, it's false. So Herb found the right solution after having been confused in between, because the US doesn't have any official language, which I didn't know. So, anyways, now this is for the statisticians among us, right? Our numerals are of Indian origin, true or false?
Yes. True.
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 Divided opinions.
True.
True. The Europeans adopted the Arabic numerals, so they are Arabic in the first place, right? And that's how I learned it at school, but the Arabians adopted it from India. Anyways. Okay, because all of us are so Catholic, we are now going to the Vatican. The ceiling of the Sistine Chapel was painted by Da Vinci. True or false?
False.
True? False?
Michelangelo.
False. Yeah, okay. I see you got profound knowledge on matters that are needed here. It's false. It was Michelangelo Buonarroti who did that at the time. Now comes the ACU question. So your contract is not going to be continued if you answer the wrong way with this one. Okay? Popes cannot have children legitimately. True or false?
When you're including immaculate.
What's that? What's that?
Immaculate conception.
And as a general rule, I do not talk about this one exception in the 50th century or something, or the 18th century.
They were married before they became a priest, and then
But then would need a divorce, come on.
only have one.
You cannot have a divorce and become a priest in the Catholic Church.
Right. Unless you're church in England.
You can be a Catholic priest in New York. But that's not really
Okay,
But you have
okay.
to devote your life
At any rate, that was the correct explanation. If you murder your wife, you can. Both can legitimately have children since every bit goer. Okay, you just scored fabulously, and the test is over. Our contracts will be continued. I do not know. We could stop here. Now, I show you the findings, right, from these three little studies. So what we asked participants after these items, how confident are you that you are correct with your answer very certain? Then they got feedback, false, true, right? Then we asked them, how surprised you, as confused are you about this feedback? And we gave them the opportunity to either directly explore the explanation or at least to express their motivation.
Did they get true feedback, Reinhard? Correct. Did they get true feedback?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it was balanced. True and false statements were balanced, and the level of difficulty was such that there was not too much variation in terms of the percentage correctly solved. So that which is a precondition to do this. So cognitive incongruity would be involved when you produce a false answer despite being confident it's correct, right? This is called in the literature high confidence error. Knowledge I strongly believed in turns out to be incorrect. Technically, that would be an interaction of the accuracy of your answer with your prior confidence, right? And you then use multi-level modeling with tasks level 1 and persons at level 2. And in preliminary analyses across 3 studies, we looked just into the correlations, and I show you as an example the correlations between the accuracy of the answer and the 3 epistemic emotions. And what you see is, within persons, consistent and substantial correlations between substantially weaker and less consistent. Here, for example, this is just a 0 correlation. In the second study, we also included pride and shame. I talk about that in a minute. And what you see here, for example, within a strong correlation between accuracy of answer, success, right, and then being proud. Between persons, no link between success and pride, which is not according to theory, experience, and so on. In the third study, there was even one case here, confusion, accuracy, confusion, negative relation, when you have been right, and the positive feedback, less confused, right? Between persons, the positive, so even the direction of signs. We forgot about between person analysis in the subsequent tests and focused on within person analysis. And in the first study, we did have these measures: accuracy, confidence, surprise, clarity, confusion, and asked them how strong is your desire to receive an explanation for an incorrect answer. And obviously, we did that only after incorrect answers. And what you see is accuracy did have a negative first-order effect on all 3 epistemic emotions. So if the answer was correct, right, less surprise, and so on. But above and beyond this first-order effect, the interaction of accuracy and confidence had negative effects. So if you have been wrong, but have been convinced you have been right prior to getting the feedback, then more surprise, curiosity, confusion. And to look into this interaction, we then decomposed it and looked into the effects of confidence for correct and incorrect answers separately. Right? And these are the effects of having been confident in incorrect answers, so these high confidence errors, right? Produce surprise, curiosity, and confusion, and curiosity and confusion then drive participants' motivation to get an explanation for the incorrectness of their answer. Second study, same design, but we expanded the exploration measure by looking into their factual behavior, so they had the opportunity to request and then see an explanation for their incorrect answer. And the other thing that we did was including these 2 achievement emotions here based on the reasoning that epistemic and achievement emotions should behave differently, should represent distinct categories of human emotions. So we would assume that cognitive incongruity drives epistemic emotions and success and failure, achievement emotions, which would imply technically that epistemic emotions are influenced by the accuracy, more confidence interaction, but achievement emotions just by first-order effects of success versus failure, right? And that's what we see. So first order effects of accuracy on the epistemic emotions and on the achievement emotions, but above and beyond that, the interaction had effects on the epistemic emotions, but almost no effects here. I mean, it's all significant due to the high size of the sample of TARS, right? So for achievement emotions, these effects of being successful versus not successful are substantially more important than the interaction with prior confidence. We again decomposed the interaction, so high confidence errors promoting surprise, curiosity, confusion. And here confusion did not have a positive effect on exploration, curiosity did have a positive effect. When adding the achievement, when including the achievement emotions as well, not much is added, except for having been confident in an answer that turns to be a failure contributes to shame. Third study, the same design as the second one, but an even more extended behavioral measure in which they then really could ask for more and more and more information, right? And again, for the epistemic emotions, the interaction of accuracy and confidence was an important driver. For achievement emotions, just the accuracy in terms of a first order effect. And decomposing that again, high confidence errors drive surprise, curiosity, confusion. And here, confusion again had a positive effect on exploration. And if you include the achievement emotions, not much is added except for this effect of having been wrong despite prior confidence contributed to one's shame about failing. Okay, conclusions. It seems to be the case that cognitive incongruity prompts epistemic emotions. I've shown the evidence for surprise, curiosity, and confusion. And the evidence is pretty clear, consistent, and robust for these high confidence errors, substantially less clear for a mismatch between epistemic beliefs and type of task. Success and failure drive achievement emotions, epistemic emotions are driven by cognitive incongruity. So it seems to be the case that it's possible to distinguish between these types of emotions. Epistemic emotions drive knowledge exploration, surprise and curiosity, positive effects for confusion, positive effects in a few of the studies, but not in all of them. We really need more research. It's such an important emotion, right? In students' everyday life and in everybody's everyday life being confused, right? Because not being able to find the solution to contradictory information. And we just need to find out what's the individual dispositions, what's the task demands that make it possible to use confusion productively rather than shifting into hopeless confusion. We did have a piece on that in Learning Instruction a few years ago. So more research is needed on this issue. And obviously, I mean, there are many, many, many more open problems than we are having answers today. What about epistemic emotions other than these three? What about epistemic emotions beyond the lab? This has been lab studies, right? In real life schools settings in the classroom during studying, what's the effects of curiosity over the years? There's a little bit of research, but the research is not methodologically very sound, and most of it is cross-sectional. And then typically also an emotion like curiosity is just buried in broad constructs such as the big five openness and stuff like that. And it also is just an unclarified, unanswered question how it would be possible to prevent the development of hopeless confusion, related frustration and boredom. And on the positive side, how task and learning environments could be designed to promote productive epistemic emotions. If you want to know more, if you're curious and want to know more about a bit of this, this is a handbook on emotions in education that also contains a fantastic chapter about Judge Rubenstein on curiosity. That was 2014. That's a more recent one, 2017, in which we also addressed epistemic emotions. Christian Muis was in the group of authors. I would want to acknowledge the contributions of my collaborators, and with regard to epistemic emotions, that's Christian Muis, McGill, Ko Murayama, Reading, UK, Lisa Vogl at Munich, Greg Travis, USC, Roger Azevedo, Memphis now, Phil Vinny, Simon Fraser, University of Vancouver, and Bear Sinatra, USC. Thank you very much. Perfect.
With the self-concept research, we look at the issue of domain specificity, and the pattern of results is reasonably consistent over different domains, so that the fish little pod effect is there for different subject matter. But the domains, the different school subjects, are highly domain specific. Now, I'm assuming that with the emotions, that you probably get a similar pattern over different school subjects, but they would probably vary substantially as to how domain specific they are.
Both of this is true. With regard to the domain specificity of emotions, we looked into this issue to quite an extent for achievement emotions, and there is differentiation between domain-related emotions that takes place, the development takes place over years, starts in elementary school, where, I mean, there's still pretty much a positive, negative kind of emotions not differentiated and domains not differentiated. But then during secondary school, towards the end of secondary school, emotions such as enjoyment or pride or anxiety, boredom, are just almost completely domain-specific and to quite an extent driven by student self-confidence in the subject. So math anxiety and language anxiety, the correlations are near to zero. But there still is a big variation between the emotions in terms of specificity, and anxiety is the one that typically shows a little bit of a generalizability across subject, maybe due to the genetic component, which is relatively strong in anxiety as compared with other emotions. But it follows and obviously, I mean, not only the domain specificity, the other mechanisms that you explained in your models, such as the big little point. So we are just in the process of publishing a piece where we show that the big fish little pond effect also extends to students' emotions, and we call this colleague of the big fish then the happy fish, so it's a happy fish little pond effect. Being in a group of high achievers, you feel lousy, all else being equal, right? Being in a group of low achievers, you are happy and proud.
So in the last study then, you had the event, surprise, confusion, and curiosity. So that that says to me that surprise is the initial reaction, and then is curiosity and confusion have a more cognitive component to it than surprise? Is that the idea? Or?
Yeah, exactly. So surprise, according to all what we know from EEG research and so on, I mean, to be honest, if you in these data sets, the emotions were assessed in this order, but it's still cross-sectional. Among the emotions, it is cross-sectional. So we cannot really, that also was a reviewer criticism, we cannot disentangle the temporal relation using this data, right? But still, surprise is an immediate, I mean, it depends on cognizing, perceiving that there is a mismatch. So, I turn around, and when I turn back, I expect Phil still to be sitting there. In between, you would have vanished, right? That would be quite, I mean, shocking and quite surprising. But that would be an immediate perceptual. I mean, you do have the template of the prior perception still in your visual area, right? And you match the present perception to this template, and so that's a very immediate process. There's not much reflection needed. And curiosity, you need to have a conception of what you want to know in order to conceive this information gap, this mismatch with desired knowledge, right? And confusion also involves, I mean, more reflection.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was wondering about that as well. and in the initial studies, sometimes surprise was positive, sometimes it was negative, sometimes it was non-significant, so that makes sense what it's followed by. I was interested as well, so not only the certainty, knowledge certainty as a potential moderator, but I was thinking, so I don't know much about Vogl, sustained travel, or, those things. I was pretty uncertain in my answers. But I was thinking not just certainty, but also something about investment, whether it's prior interest about the domain or prior knowledge or something that's meaningful to you in some way, if that might be an important moderator.
Oh, the Pope should be meaningful to No, absolutely. absolutely. I mean, value is an amplifier for all emotions. And if there's zero value, then intensity of emotion either stays at a very low level or the emotion is not triggered at all. Absolutely. And if it's about things that you really deeply believe in, God exists or whatever, or winning the Nobel Prize is important, and then all of your emotions are exacerbated as compared with, I don't care about it.
Is this a distinction with Jackie's expectancy value theory, where the multiplier effect of value is more central in your control value theory than it is in her expectancy value theory?
Yes. But I mean, traditionally in expectancy, as you know, I mean, in expectancy value theories, the multiplication was very central. I mean, Bernoulli in 1781 and so on. I think, I mean, Jackie then just, at least that's what she told me, they weren't using self-report measures and so on. They weren't able to detect, at least not an important effect of the interaction, and then for the sake of parsimony, she just dropped it in the beginning of the 80s, right? So.
I really enjoyed that, so thanks for the presentation. The epistemic emotion of curiosity sounds like it has quite a bit in common with intrinsic motivation, or it could be a good proxy for intrinsic motivation. So I think what you were saying about considering the difference between within person and between variation is really important, but do you think there might also be an additional contribution of environment and need satisfaction in the environment, insofar as curiosity will probably persist if needs are satisfied and not if they're frustrated?
I mean, curiosity is driven in the first place by a gap between what you know now, and what you want to know, right? So it's about the desired state of knowledge that you did not yet achieve. And then it's about the value of this desired knowledge that then defines the intensity of your curiosity and your exploratory behavior and your motivation to persist and so on. And if you suspect that this desired knowledge would help you to satisfy basic needs, then that would absolutely then drive curiosity, right? I mean, if I'm in the desert, there's no food, no water, and then I start being extremely curious, where is the next oasis, right? I mean, that's a mundane kind of curiosity, but still.
Did you focus mostly on when the answer was wrong?
Just
I understand.
Just for your fun.
Yeah, no, I understand. But also it would be interesting to look at when the answer was correct. And, how confident you were whether it was correct. And, even when I got it right, the answers, the explanations were sort of interesting, and, so on and so forth. So, I suppose you looked at that, and...
That's this one. Oh, no, wait a minute. Whoops, this is bad, actually, because I'm going the wrong way. Okay, we also looked into students' reactions to correct answers, right? And it's definitely a different picture then. So less surprise if you're successful, with positive feedback, more pride, and pride then also plays a role in further exploring. And these emotions, I mean, still, especially so curiosity, then still play a role. And if you are nevertheless curious, I mean, you may be less curious when you succeeded, but you may still be curious, and then you start to explore. Absolutely. That's what we find. Yeah. But, I mean, I would say, if you are correct all the time, and we could just translate that into school practice, if students get positive feedback all the time over only, what's the inference, right? And to what extent would that drive motivation? I mean, we know that that would not work, 100% positive reinforcement. So,
the distinction between within and between. So, in a case where all else was being equal, the between people would be counterfactual cases for each other, right? And so, in that case, if you had the right causal model, the within and between should give you the same results. So I suppose what I'm asking is when you get different results, that suggests to me that there's a factor that is missing from the causal model. I wonder whether you knew what that might be or you had some ideas of what it is.
Yeah. And this is in fact one of the questions that the Lex systematic answers. I mean, there is a general answer, and the general answer that has been beautifully elaborated by Manuel Vogl from the Humboldt University at Berlin, is there's equivalence when conditions of ergodicity hold. And that's functional homogeneity across persons and sessionarity over time. And this has first been explored in physics, I mean decades back, and has then transferred to the behavioral sciences by some of us. I mean, Peter Molinar played a role, and Manuel is doing, as I said, fantastic work. And now, under what conditions is there functional homogeneity, and when do we find that there is divergence? And that's exactly, yeah. I don't have a general answer to that. The only thing that I know is, so Andy Elliott and I, we speculated about the link between achievement goals and students' achievement emotions, and published on that topic. And then Thomas Götz, one of my former doctoral students, set up an ESM study doing the same thing intra-individually, and I really worsened Andy's when we were a bit in panic. What would happen if you look into this link that we thought was firmly established between performance goals and anxiety and so on, if you look into this link from within person perspective? And what happened was it was exactly the same. So the emotion was relief, obviously, but and we did have some theoretical thoughts about that in the discussion section. All right.
Great. Thank you very much. Now, this is Reinhard's last day with us for this trip, I believe. Last day in the office.
Yeah, I might be back tomorrow to wrap.
Okay. So if any of you haven't had a chance to say hello to or introduce yourself, take this opportunity now, and he'll be coming back to see us regularly, and he'll be collaborating with us even when he's not here. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for attending.
Thank you.